she told you, you still showed up? Wow.
Fortunately, this isn't a cell phone case that will bring angry crowds. That could be worse.
Are we
Yes.
ready?
Turn your audio off.
We're ready? Okay. This time I will call, excuse me, the October meeting of the East Hempfield Township Zoning Hearing Board to order. Members who are present this evening are Mr. Luce, Mr. Kyle, Mr. Hanson, Mr. Bingham, and myself, Elam Hurd, Chairman. With us this evening, we have our Colin Seholtz, who is our zoning officer, and Jason Hess, our legal counsel. We also have with us this evening a court reporter taking minutes. We have one new case this evening and any other old business that may come before us. This board will hear this case in an informal manner without strict compliance with the rules and procedures used in a court trial. We'll ask the applicant and any individuals interested in this case to step in front of the table and explain the circumstances involved in their application. Applicants may present their case themselves or through their attorneys or other representatives. My fellow board members and I, as well as our solicitor, may ask the applicant questions from time to time during the applicant's presentation or at its conclusion. All persons having an interest in the application will be given an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant, to offer evidence of their own, and inform the board of their position on the matter. In the interest of prompt and orderly disposition of the case, we asked all interested people to refrain from speaking until the applicant's presentation has been completed and the board has had the opportunity to question the applicant. At the beginning of the case, people who are interested in the case should decide whether they desire to be parties to it. By being given the status of a party, that person will be entitled to receive notice of the decision in this case and will be entitled to participate in any subsequent appeal or rehearing. Individuals who are not given party status may nevertheless ask questions and present evidence, but will not receive notice of the decision and will not automatically be entitled to participate in any appeal or subsequent rehearing. If you desire to be a party, we will ask you to sign an entry of appearance form at the appropriate time. And although the case each party will receive a written copy of the decision, the mechanics of typing and signing the decision will take approximately 4 weeks. We asked that each person who asks a question or makes a statement first state his or her name and address for the court reporter. Normally, I would administer the oath to all persons present who would make any comments this evening in this case, but since there are no individuals in the meeting room except our director of planning, and the applicant is presenting his case over Zoom with his witnesses, I will swear in all parties or all those who will testify this evening at the appropriate time. At this time, then, we will salute the flag. I would appreciate those on Zoom to participate. So everyone please rise, salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Gentlemen, you had received copies of the August 17th, 2020 board minutes. If there are no additions, deletions, or corrections, I would ask for a motion to approve the board minutes as presented by the secretary.
So moved.
Who said that? Mr. Kyle. Moved by Mr. Kyle. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bingham. Any discussion, gentlemen? Mr. Luce?
In favor.
Mr. Kyle?
In favor.
Mr. Hanson?
In favor.
Mr. Bingham?
In favor.
And I will also vote in favor. The board minutes of August 17th, 2020 have been approved by a 5-0 vote.
Forgot you with the mask on.
Case this evening, Colin, has been advertised according to Sunshine Law and the MPC.
Yes.
Okay. Any old business?
No.
Okay. At this time, Mr. Kyle.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to recuse myself from case number 2418 as I own real estate in close proximity to the application.
Okay. I'll accept that, and you're welcome to stay or join everybody else in the audience.
I think I will take my leave.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yep, thank you.
Also, before, do you want me bring the case up first, Jason, or?
Yeah, you can bring it up.
Okay. With that then, Colin, case this evening.
Case 2418, New Singular Wireless PCS LLC, doing business as AT&T Mobility, 2201 Marietta Avenue, seeks a special exception approval and variance approval for a small cell wireless facility.
Okay. As I had stated previously, the applicant is not present this evening. I presume the applicant or their representative is on Zoom.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And would you like to state your name and address for the court reporter?
Sure. My name is Christopher Schubert. I'm the attorney for the applicant tonight in New Singular Wireless PCS LLC. I practice law with the law firm of Riley, Riper, R-I-P-E-R, Hollin, H-O-L-L-I-N, and Colagreco, C-O-L-A-G-R-E-C-O. That's located in Exton, Pennsylvania, at an address of 717 Constitution Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Schubert. Before we go on now, first of all, I will turn it over to Mr. Hess.
Okay, thank you. I guess I just have a few, housekeeping things to go through. And, since this application is not only governed by the MPC, but also under federal law, specifically Telecommunications Act and FCC orders, I noticed that, so the application, I believe, was filed on August 27th. Is that correct?
I will have to take a look.
How many people are on?
Yes, that's correct. There is a letter that was overnighting the application. It would have been received by the township August 28.
Okay, received by August 28th. Okay. And then there was a letter from the township saying that the application was not complete and that there were some other items that needed to be submitted. And then you, I believe, Mr. Schubert had.
Jason, 1 second.
Yeah.
If I can interrupt you.
Sure.
A technical thing. For those, since you still have your mask on, for those who are, if I can speak. For those of you who are on Zoom, can you understand Mr. Hess? If somebody can't, please let us know. Otherwise.
Chairman, I am monitoring chat, so if they want to be recognized or if
I can hear him. This is Kevin O'Keefe. I can hear him.
Okay.
Anybody that's on chat, or on Zoom, I'm monitoring the chat. They'll let me know who they are, what firm they're with. That way I can provide it to the stenographer. And then,
Okay, I just want to make sure because I don't want anybody to say they couldn't hear somebody. So if anybody on Zoom cannot hear somebody that has their mask on, please go onto the chat and let us know and we will correct it. Jason, I interrupted you. Please continue.
Okay. And just on Friday, there was a letter from you, Mr. Schubert, right, with a list of items that you were submitting. So this would have been Friday, October 16th. You submitted multiple documents that were in support of the application that are required by the zoning ordinance, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Hess.
Okay. And you also, I guess the fee that was previously submitted was not quite correct. So you also submitted the balance of the application fee on Friday?
That's correct.
Okay. So do you agree then that the application was complete then as of Friday, October 16th?
I would stipulate to that. And for purposes, if the board is concerned regarding the shot clock under federal law, I would agree that as of September 9, I'd received an initial letter from Mr. Seitholtz, the zoning officer, advising that the application was not complete and additional documentation needed to be submitted.
Okay.
That was supplemented with a letter from your telecommunications counsel, Mike Roberts. And it was October 16 when we satisfied the completeness issues. My understanding is hopefully we satisfy the completeness issues. So there's not a lot of time that has elapsed on the shot clock for my calculation.
Okay. Thank you. And so the documents that you submitted Friday, other than that, the application, what was part of the application itself, and the documents you submitted Friday, is that everything that you have submitted for this application?
I do have two additional exhibits, maybe three additional exhibits for this evening, which I would offer through testimony in the course of the proceedings here this evening. One is a street view of the location of the proposed small cell facility. The other document would be the deed for the subject property showing the ownership in Marjorie Jackson as the property owner. The only other document that had not been submitted previously, either through the original application or with my supplemental filings, was the CV of one of my professionals, the expert witness, Andrew Peterson, who's a professional engineer with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Okay. When you're referring to these documents, are you going to ask that they be marked at that time?
Yeah. So
how are you planning on presenting that?
So, Mr. Hess, I have pre-marked exhibits, which if I'm able to share the screen, and I don't know if the board members are able to see a screen and what I'm projecting on the Zoom meeting.
Attorney Schubert, if there's something you need to be shared, just let me know and I can bring it up.
Yeah, so right now it shows that the host has disabled the screen sharing, and if I'm able to share the screen, I could project these documents.
We do not allow the public to screen share. If there is, we have everything digitally that you submitted. If there's anything that you want me to share, I can do that. Just let me know which document you want me to share.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. There were three documents that were not part of the submission or the supplementation that I was going to offer tonight through testimony. One being the street view of the location, one being a deed, and the CV of one of my witnesses. I'm happy to keep the record open for purposes, and then for that, there's nothing too exciting with regard to the street view. Actually, we have photo simulations that would also show a view of the property with the existing conditions, which would give the board an idea of where this property is located and what is being conducted on the property. The deed is a public document, and I could submit that subsequently. And the CV of Mr. Peterson, I could also submit that following this hearing or tomorrow electronically to the zoning officer. Whatever the board's pleasure would be in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, are you okay with him submitting those?
Yeah, unless you have some objections, we can get it in tomorrow and have it.
Okay. My main concern was that if we're going to be going through a bunch of exhibits that we know, and if you say that you have them pre-marked and that we can, mark them accordingly, that's fine, just so that we have exhibit numbers assigned to them when we're referring to them.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Hess, I've asked Colin to email Attorney Schubert. He can email those documents to us, we can share them, and then they can get marked, print them off, and we can mark them for exhibits if that's acceptable to you all.
If that works.
You know,
Mr. Schubert, can that be accomplished on your part?
Sure, I'll keep an eye open for an email, and then I'll just attach those documents.
Okay, I appreciate that.
What am I supposed to say? Colin, email him with your computer.
I already did. He has my email. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do.
Just send him a quick email.
Email to confirm to send the stuff to us.
Right now.
Include my email on it.
Okay.
I can't find his email address.
Colin, you just sent me an email with the passcode. I can just respond to that if that's okay.
Yes, that'll be fine.
All right.
He can just forward it to you. We'll make it work. Did you send it?
Yeah, it's been sent.
It's been sent, Mr. Schubert.
Okay. Okay, I just returned the documents along with my exhibit list. Now, God willing, they don't get hung up in spam or somebody's server.
We can probably move on while we wait for those. I just wanted to
Yeah,
to
go
make
ahead.
sure. I don't have anything else as far
Okay.
as that goes.
Then before Mr. Schubert, you get started, is there anyone on Zoom that wants to be a party to this case? If you do, please notify us by chat. We'll wait a couple minutes, see if anybody comes through. Nothing, John? Okay.
Looks like there's 4 there, isn't there? Well, we're waiting for that. Could we have Mr. Schubert to clarify exactly the variances he is requesting since it wasn't on his application page?
No, I better wait till see who wants to be a party, and then we'll go. Okay. For the record, been notified by Mr. Beck that no one who is on Zoom has asked to be a party to this case. Also, again, there is no one in the attendance here at the meeting. So with that, we will proceed. Now, Mr. Hanson asked Mr. Schubert, before we get started on the case, I'll turn it again back to Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Schubert, on the first page of the application under general information, it says nature request and applicable section number, see addendum A.
Mhm.
Just to make it easy, because this is a new ordinance, would you please request the variances that you are requesting?
Yes. So the relief that the applicant is looking for with this particular small cell, and this would fit within a small cell wireless facility by definition. So the first form of relief would be a special exception under the use regulations. This property is located within the VC Village Center Commercial District, and pursuant to section 270-5.2 Q2B2G, new small cell facilities involving the placement of a new wireless support structure are permitted by special exception. The particular variance relief that we're looking for are essentially a variance from performance standards that
Before
would
you
not
get
be.
into the variances, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're looking for a special exception to section 270-3.8D6.
Well, I'm using the wireless ordinance that was adopted. I don't know if that's the codified section, so that could create some problems with regard to the specific items that we're looking for.
Because under our current zoning ordinance, under section 270-3.8D6, lists, or under section D, lists what is needed or what special exceptions are needed for, and 6 is the communications antenna.
So Mark, I believe that the new wireless facilities ordinance would supersede that.
Okay?
So it would not be 273.8D6. It would be whatever's listed in the new wireless facilities ordinance.
Because that was 275.2.
Q2B2G.
Mr. Schubert, go ahead with your variance request.
Verify that code section. 2B, 2G, correct. Which reads, special exception required, the following zoning districts permit small cell WFs wireless facilities requiring the installation of a new wireless support structure as uses by special exception. And that sub G is the village center zone, the VC district. So in terms of variance relief, there are performance standards that are applicable to what are defined as macro cells and also small cell wireless facilities. And under the new wireless ordinance, section 270-5.2Q2B3F, there's a requirement for installing landscaping and fencing at the base of the small cell wireless facility. In light of the fact that this is going to be a functional light pole and a replacement pole for an existing light pole that is on the property, I would believe that putting in an 8-foot fence around the base of that just wouldn't make sense. It's more applicable to a macro large cell site facility. Likewise, when you'll see the photo simulations of the location, that light pole sits on macadam, very close to the right-of-way and driveway access. It's all paved, it's all impervious surface, and landscaping wouldn't make sense in that location either as a replacement swap-out light pole. So that would be a requested variance from the performance standards that are set forth under that code section. And then finally, there's a request for a variance, again, from another performance standard in terms of setback. Now, this one has a little bit of a wrinkle to it because I believe that there would be a typo under the wireless ordinance. But if we look at section 270.5, I'm sorry, 270-5.2 Q2B3N and Roman numeral 4, that establishes minimum setbacks, but the actual language under that section says that the minimum setback has to be no less than, let me go to the actual language.
No less than 110% of the proposed small cell wireless
Actually, it
facility.
says, and actually it says shall not exceed 110% of the proposed height. I think it is intended to be not less than 110%, but it actually reads in this copy, shall not exceed 110%, which would imply that anything between 0 and 110% of the height of the pole would be adequate. But assuming just to be on the safe side, I had put in the request for a variance from that minimum setback. The issue here is that there's also an allowance as long as a lesser setback would have no negative effects on public safety. The zoning hearing board can consider a lesser setback. Right now, that existing light pole is placed at about 4 feet from the side yard property setback. This is actually a corner lot which fronts on Roarstown Road and Marietta Avenue. And as a result of it being a corner lot, there are 2 front yards by definition that apply on this property. The subject yard, which is adjoining where this light pole is located, would be, again, by definition, a side yard. And under the separate standards of the ordinance set forth at section 270-3.8 E2, a 10-foot setback for accessory uses would be required. Now, the light pole itself is set back about 4 feet. As a result, there's a currently non-conforming setback that exists with regard to the light pole. And this replacement swap out light pole to be used for a wireless communications facility would also be set back that same distance at 4 feet. So as a result, we're not further decreasing or looking at it a different way. We're not increasing the extent of the non-conforming setback that already exists at that location. And our project manager would also testify, as would the site acquisition consultant, that given the structural report that has been submitted with this application, there won't be any negative effects of this new proposed wireless support structure on public safety. These are designed to very stringent requirements, and as a result, we would believe that the 4-foot setback would be adequate without even grant of a variance.
Okay.
Before you go on, Mr. Schubert, just so you know, that the final ordinance that was adopted by the township, it says shall be no less than 110%. So the final that was passed had that correction in it. You just got probably an early version of it before it was totally adopted.
Right. I have one that was published on the township's website, and probably not the official copy that was ultimately adopted.
Right. I just wanted so you knew that, yeah, the township picked that up also.
Wonderful.
Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Schubert, my question is, don't you think you need a variance to section 270-5.2 Q2B 3B? Any wireless facilities and wireless support structures over 40 feet in height shall be equipped with an anti-climbing device as approved by the manufacturer?
That section relates to, and again, it may well be that I'm looking at an older version. My version reads any macro wireless facility over 40 feet.
This is the adopted resolution by the township is just as I read it to you. There's nothing about macro or anything in there.
Okay. So if that is the case, so currently we have antennas that are proposed to top out at 41 feet. I'm going to put the engineer on the spot here, and also the radio frequency expert. If we can drop that pole height by a foot, we would comply with that requirement. And I'm just wondering if we could stipulate to that. Andy, I don't know if you're on or Dale, you can.
Mr. Schubert, give them, excuse me, you can give them some time to think about that, since we really haven't started your testimony. These are just questions Mr. Hanson is asking. During their testimony, they could answer that question for you, and it would be put in part of the record. That's satisfactory to you.
That's very satisfactory. That's fine.
Okay.
Does the ordinance read tower height or tower with appurtenances, or are we interpreting the antenna height to constitute the tower? Because we are, the top of the steel is at 39 and change.
Please, whoever was just speaking, just state your name and address so the court reporter has it, please.
I apologize. It's Andrew Peterson, box 165, Fairview Village, Pennsylvania, with DBM Engineering.
Thank you.
I'll let Mr. Hess answer that question.
Yeah, and I, you know, before you start offering any testimony or anything, you should get sworn in. But I do want to just answer that question, because a wireless support structure, height of a wireless support structure is defined to include antenna, and your application says the antenna is at 41 feet. which would make the height of the wireless support structure for purposes of this greater than 40 feet, which means that section would be applicable.
What section of the ordinance are you referring to?
You mean about the height of a wireless support structure? That's in the definitions. Give me a second here.
Alan, I would agree. I just read that definition, and I would agree.
It's-
It includes the antenna.
It's section, section 2, number 14 on page, it's on page 3 of the version I have, height of a wireless support structure.
I see, it looks like my exhibits came through.
Yes,
Yes.
they did, Attorney Schubert. I received attachments A2 through A13 and a subsequent Word document with all the attachments.
Mr. Schubert, while your testifiers figure out the answer to that question, is there anything else you need?
No, that's it.
Would you like to start presenting your case? Sorry it took so long, but as Mr. Hanson said, this is a new ordinance, and also by doing it by Zoom, we're just, trying to get through this. So at this time, as I stated, there were no parties to the case, so, additional parties. So if you would like to start, again, Just for the record, please state your name. Everyone, please state your name when you're talking at the first time so the court reporter knows it, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Sure.
And I don't believe anyone's been sworn in yet, right?
No, and when you call a witness, I will have to swear each one of them in.
Okay. Do you want to do that all up front or as I call?
John, can we get them all up on the screen at one time? His witnesses? I presume that is your witnesses? Oh, wait a minute.
We have Andrew Peterson, Dale Kelman, Mike Ozer, Kevin O'Keefe.
They are your witnesses, Mr. Schubert?
That is correct.
Okay, gentlemen, please, if you would raise your right hand. You don't have to stand so I could see the person who did stand. I presume your hand's up if you're standing. Under penalties of
That's him.
under penalties of perjury, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please say I do.
I do.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You may be seated. I didn't realize that was you. Okay. So with that, Mr. Schubert, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, just by way of brief background, this is an application seeking both special exception and some variance relief for a proposed new small cell wireless facility as defined under the township's new wireless telecommunications ordinance, which was just adopted a few months ago. The location of this property is at 2201 Marietta Avenue. There is currently a commercial use on the property. It's actually being used for a motorcycle repair shop and sales. There is at the front of this property where the main garage doors are located, a light pole immediately to the left-hand side along the side property line. That light pole is proposed to be replaced by a new wireless support structure, again, by definition under the township code. That structure will still support a light standard, a light for that property, but it will extend to an overall height of 38 feet and 9 inches, on top of which a circular antenna would be placed. Was I just knocked out here? Hello?
You're there. We
Okay.
can still hear you. We just have a picture on our screen.
Okay. I am not seeing that, unfortunately. Let me see.
It's the street view.
Okay, perfect. I have it. Yes, so, yep, that is the property. And that is the existing light pole. This is applicant's exhibit A2, indicating where that light pole is and the approximate location of the property line. We also have site plans that depict a site plan view of where that property line is and the light pole in relation to the line. My first witness that I would call is the site acquisition consultant, Mr. Mike Ozer. Mike, you on board?
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you. So, Mike, could you describe who you work for and what you do as a site acquisition consultant?
I work for a network building and consulting, who is a turf vendor for AT&T Mobility, doing business as New Singular Wireless PC LLC.
All right. And as a turf vendor, does that mean that essentially NB and C are authorized agents working on behalf of AT&T with regard to these types of applications?
That is correct, yes.
And what's been your experience as a site acquisition consultant? Can you give a bit of an idea?
Basically 26 years, 27 years in the business now. And then from there, I basically I am given information from our radio frequency department. I go to individual sites, now called pins here with the AT&T small cell project, literally drive in circles looking for a site that is a viable site for zoning, planning, building, and construction, and also for leasing as well.
All right. And part of your duties are to investigate an area as directed by the radio frequency engineer for AT&T. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what were you called upon to do for this particular area in East Hempfield Township?
Well, for this particular site, the pin was basically somewhere in the intersection of Marietta Avenue and Rohrstown Road. I basically drove the area several different times, several different days, several different locations, and selected roughly about 5 sites initially and presented them to the radio frequency department as viable small cell candidates. From there, they were in several different directions, several different areas near the 2201 Marietta Avenue, and with different aspects of each, whether they be, several of them were PP&L poles, Verizon pole, signs, regular signs, stop signs, and also at one point there was a PennDOT lighted PennDOT facility that was also being considered.
All right. And now, Mike, I don't know if you can see what has been projected onto the screen as applicant's exhibit A2, which is entitled
Yes.
Street View of the Subject Property. Are you familiar with that property?
Yes, I am.
And you've been out to that property before?
Yes, I have several times.
All right. And I note in this photograph that there are a number of other tall structures around that intersection. And I take it that's the intersection at Marietta and Rohrstown Road?
That is correct.
And in the background behind the building, it looks to be along the street right-of-way of Rohrstown Road in the background. It appears to be some sort of electric utility pole.
Correct. Those are electric. They are electric lines, utility poles, and they are non-satisfactory, or they are not viable for our use, AT&T's use, or really for any carrier's use, because they carry primary power. The electric utility will not permit any attachment because of safety reasons to any facility that has primary power.
Okay. And then I note right at the intersection, there appears to be a street traffic light and some directional signs, and it also looks like a Cobra style light on top of a light pole.
That is correct.
Was that structure considered in any way?
It was considered and dismissed because a PennDOT facility, lit or directional, is still owned by the local municipality. And to this date, the municipality, East Hempfield Township, has no interest in owning the pole, owning the replacement that that PennDOT would supply there. Again, even though it is a PennDOT controlled facility, the lighting, the directional, and everything else, it is still owned by the township. And again, East Hempfield Township has no indication and has given no indication that they would own any facility.
Okay. So then you directed your attention to the subject property 2201 Marietta.
Yes, I did.
What contact did you make with the property owner in that regard?
Contacted the property owner, and from there negotiated terms of lease. And at that point, it was a go for radio frequency. They accepted the location, and we're here today because of that.
Okay. Now, if you could project, Colin, Exhibit A3, which is the deed for the subject property.
Yeah. 1 second, Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Kozer, there are several properties within 1 block of there that would be large enough to accommodate your 41-foot or your 40-foot pole and antenna height for 41 feet. So you wouldn't need any of these variances. Were any of those properties approached?
At this particular time, what I'd like to do is have Mr. Schubert contact or tell you, turn the testimony over to Kevin O'Keefe, as he is the other alternate agent that was with me in the sites, and he can answer that question.
All right, Mr. O'Keefe, are you on board?
Yes, this is Kevin O'Keefe.
Could you state your full name and business address for the record?
Sure. Kevin O'Keefe, 502 Dorham Court, Westchester, Pennsylvania, 19380.
Thank you.
Are you, Mr. O'Keefe, are you also employed by the same company that Mr. Ozer is employed by?
I'm a contractor with Network Building and Consulting. I've been a contractor with them since 2014.
Okay. And you are also a site acquisition consultant,
Correct.
and you're here tonight as an authorized agent on behalf of the applicant, AT&T?
That is true.
All right. Now, you heard the question of one of the board members. Could you address some of the other properties that you considered?
Sure.
And whether that property, any of those properties that had been mentioned were considered by you?
There were 3 additional properties that we actually contacted basically the same day that we were in touch with the motorcycle, the current location. Unfortunately, we did not get any response back to 2 of them, and the third heard about it, took some information, but opted to pass on the opportunity. So we basically got to the point where, you know, we spoke with the tenant who put us in touch with Marjorie Jackson. We went and explained it thoroughly to Ms. Jackson and explained that the pole that they currently have, which according to the tenant as well as the landlord, had not been working for a number of years, that we would come in, show them exactly what we would be able to do to replace that, possibly, you know, increase the lighting at their location and make it, to be honest with you, make it a better looking pole.
Okay. Now, you indicated that the property owner is a Marjorie Jackson. Applicant has offered Exhibit A3, which is a deed for the property. And I know that Mr. O'Keefe, you were involved with regard to the negotiation of the lease on this property.
Yes, yes, I was.
So you were also involved in securing a title report on the property,
That's correct.
and the deed was part of that title report?
You broke up there. I apologize.
The deed was part of that title report,
Yes,
and what has been projected as A3, that should be on your screen, is a deed which appears to be dated April 4th of 2016, showing Marjorie Jackson as the grantee, correct?
yes,
Okay. Is this a copy of the deed that you acquired through your title investigation of the property?
that is correct.
Okay. And you then ultimately negotiated a lease agreement with the underlying property owner, Ms. Jackson?
Yes, I did.
And marked as applicant's Exhibit A4 is a redacted version of that lease agreement which has been executed, correct?
Correct.
To your knowledge, does that lease agreement, well, let me ask you this question. Did you negotiate that lease agreement with Ms. Jackson?
I did. I did.
And to your knowledge, does that lease agreement authorize the applicant AT&T to pursue any and all zoning entitlements that might be required from this township and the zoning hearing board?
That is correct.
And does it also provide rights of access to the site?
Yes, it does.
And what are the terms of access? Are they constant or are they restricted in any way?
No, it's 24/7 access. Typically, what we do with the small cell in this instance is that we were putting the equipment on the outside of the building. So at any time when there is an outage, AT&T would be able to access that equipment with no restriction.
Okay. And your company also had solicited photo simulation of what the proposed small cell facility would look like if it was presumed to be improved and then constructed on the property, correct?
That is correct.
And marked as applicants Exhibit A5 are photo simulations which have just been recently submitted under my transmitted letter to the zoning hearing board. Have you seen those photo simulations before?
I have.
Excuse me, Mr. Schubert, how many photos are there?
We have 2 of existing and 2 of the proposed views.
So there's 4 as this exhibit.
Well, yes, 4 total in this exhibit. Correct.
Good, thank you.
Before you go on, Colin, are these the 4 pictures that are at the back of what you gave us tonight?
Those were submitted as part of the documentation required from the letter that myself and Attorney Roberts sent out. I don't know if they are the same as the ones that were just submitted via email recently.
Mr. Schubert, would they be the same that you submitted?
They are.
Okay. Thank you.
And Mr. O'Keefe, and I don't know if you can see that on your computer screen, but what is
Yes, I can.
wonderful. So this is, what are we looking at with this view?
Well, we're looking, we're on a street view. I believe we're at, was it Royerstown Road? And we're looking directly into the, I guess you would consider it a staging area or a parking lot. And the structure is the disabled light that is currently there.
That's considered a Cobra light?
Yes,
All right. And then you have a view that shows what the replacement structure would look like, correct?
yes,
And is that what we're looking at with the second view?
that is correct.
And can you generally describe what it is that we're looking at and what are the components on this facility?
If you're looking at it from the ground up, you will see the pole along with the a small equipment enclosure. And then moving further up is the LED light. And then at the very top, that would be the antenna with the radio heads underneath.
All right, that's that small bump out just below the
Correct.
cylindrical antenna at the top?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also solicit another view of this facility, both existing and proposed?
Yes, we did.
All right, now, what are we looking at from here?
This is the adjacent property that, you know, we're taking a look at the backside or a side view of the proposed property with the existing Cobra light.
And that's, again, between those 2 vehicles.
Yes, the light is basically placed between the Jeep and the GMC. You'll see that it has a concrete foundation with 3 protective concrete, I guess you could consider them barriers to protect the pole. And then you have the pole with, in the middle of the foundation.
Okay. And then you also have a view that shows what the proposed structure would look like as placed.
Correct.
And again, same
And
component.
once again, yes, it's just a different view, from the base. And then you have the enclosure, you have the light, you have the radio heads, and then you have the antenna.
Okay. And this type of facility as a functional light pole would be considered a stealth design, is that correct?
Yes,
And what's the purpose of utilizing this type of design, and what makes it a stealth design?
The, what makes that the stealth is that you do not see any of the cabling. All the cabling is run from the inside, in comparison to some other small cells that we do with wood poles, where you would see the telecommunication, the power running up the pole. In this instance, everything's running inside the pole up.
And what would be the color of that structure?
Excuse me?
What would be the color of that structure?
That color, I believe it's brown, but it was at the discretion of the landlord. We told her we would make it either brown or black.
Okay. And under the code, the new wireless facilities ordinance, there's a requirement for the site acquisition consultant to prepare an alternatives analysis or to discuss what alternative candidates were considered. There's been a letter submitted as applicant's exhibit A6, which I believe has been signed off on by Mr. Ozer.
Correct.
So Mr. Ozer, it would probably be worthwhile for you to talk about this letter and what alternatives were being considered here. I know that you touched upon some of that.
Okay, basically, as you can see, the PIN, the PIN was in a mixed commercial area consisting of the office spaces, restaurants, small repair shops, gas station, light manufacturing, limited residents and businesses on larger lots for vehicle parking. The location is at the intersection of Orchardstown Road and Marietta Avenue. The primary candidate, again, replacing light poles and small business properties. We discounted a lot of the PP&L and Verizon utility poles in the immediate area, as the ones that did not carry primary power were not structurally sound for the project due to the amount and location of cables, guide wires, and related equipment for the electrical transmission and telecommunications transmission that were on the poles. We do have a limit with PP&L, even though we have a contract with them, and as well as a contract with Verizon, the Verizon landline. We do have limitations as to what poles can and cannot be replaced. And unfortunately, in that area, it would have been a dynamite to go onto a utility pole, but we could not use them. They were not efficient. So therefore, the majority, I initially turned in five utility poles, combination of 3 electric and 2 Verizon. They were all discounted in the engineering phase, as well as when they were turned over to the different databases for utility surveys. And at that point, I was directed to use any type of facility that was available. I went into the intersection, well, almost physically went into the intersection. We went with PennDOT, and PennDOT, I've been working with PennDOT now for about 2.5 years on different facilities across Northeast Pennsylvania. As I stated earlier, PennDOT was discounted when East Hempfield Township did not have any indication or inclination to own the facility after the small cell site was placed on it. I did approach several other businesses in the area. At that point, they showed no interest. One of them was the Roarstown Diner. They just, some of the smaller areas there just showed no interest in the small cell site. From there, Kevin was brought on to assist in this project location. He approached other properties, as he stated earlier. And from there, we decided on the 2201 Marietta Avenue location.
Okay. And that met the regular experts' requirements?
I will say yes, it did, as there was multiple locations, multiple times that I was in the area, again, driving in circles, multiple times that the proposed locations were forwarded to our radio frequency department for approval, and then to either to the electric utility or to Verizon for their approval. So it was pretty much of a good search. that we provided the radio frequency department for their review.
And is it fair to say that these types of stealth design facilities, replacement light pole as proposed, they're not inexpensive, are they?
I'm sorry, you blurped out on me there, Mr. Schubert. Say that again.
They are not inexpensive.
No, they are. That's quite true. They are not inexpensive. They are expensive, each one is specifically designed for the site that it is that is proposed. Most of them are not cookie cutters.
And would it be fair to say that this type of design would be a design of last resort?
Yes, it would be a design of last resort because just like most businesses, you try and get away with you try and have the best product at the least cost. And for us, a wooden utility pole would have been the best product at the least cost. A rooftop would also be another facility, but they were not available in this particular location.
And another issue to be considered under the wireless ordinance is any impact on aviation safety. Now, we're talking about an antenna being placed at about 41 feet above the ground. Is there any concern with regard to aviation safety relative to the structure of this type?
No, there is not.
And marked as applicant's exhibit A7 is an FCC tow air report that has been done. Are you familiar with these tow air reports?
Yeah, yes, I am. Been using those for multiple decades now. They give a very good indication from the FAA as if a full FAA requirement is necessary for air traffic safety and control. This one here, very distinctly stated that it does not require registration.
All right, and then what is plugged in by way of latitude, longitude would be the location of the proposed pole and the overall height of the pole in the base site elevation, correct?
That is correct.
And then it does its analysis and would trigger if in fact the FAA would have to be notified of this type of structure.
Correct.
Okay. And then in terms of some of the general requirements under the code, now if the board would see fit to grant the relief that AT&T is looking for here tonight, one of the requirements is for removal if the site is no longer needed, and that removal would have to take place within 60 days of the cessation of operations at the site. Would that be an acceptable condition to which you could bind AT&T?
Yes, I can, as it is also one of the conditions within the lease as well.
Okay.
And yes, I have done that before in many hearings that have encumbered AT&T to remove the property. That should have become no longer used.
Okay, and another requirement is to afford the right to the township to inspect the wireless facility to ensure compliance with the zoning code. Would that be any problem from AT&T standpoint?
No, it would not be. And also from NBNC, we do have engineers on staff that are available to specifically do the analysis of that as an as-built. But no, as for any township engineer going out and taking a look at it, there is no difficulty with that.
And there's also a requirement under the code to provide insurance in the amounts as stated for each small cell site that would be developed within the township. Would AT&T be willing to agree as any condition of approval that the board might grant to meet those insurance requirements?
Yes, within definitely reasonable limits, and that will be provided to the board as the final part of a building and/or as the building permit process and the electrical permit submission process.
The limits of liability would be a minimum of $5 million per occurrence and property damage of $5 million.
That's acceptable.
All right, and actually for small cells it would be less. That would be for a macro cell, but for small cells it would be $1 million.
That is acceptable, and I have just gone through this with another site, and that definitely is acceptable.
And would AT&T also be willing to adhere to the indemnification provisions as set forth in the code?
Yes,
And you also understand that there's further approvals that would be required from the township, one of which would be to secure required building and electrical permits from the codes office. Would that also be acceptable?
yes, and also mandatory on the part of AT&T.
And would AT&T also be willing to pay any of the fees and costs and escrows that might be required as part of any review of that process?
That is, yes, they will pay those fees.
Okay. And then finally, as I stated in my opening, under the code for small cells or wireless support structures having fencing and screening, based upon your experience with this type of stealth design as a light pole situate where it is on near the side property line, would fencing and/or screening in any way make sense or would add in terms of safety to this site?
In dealing with the small cell projects, not only for this project, but for others, any type of facility, fencing, whatever, around the base of a small cell site is not really necessary. All precautions have been taken, like for instance, ballards around it or something of that nature. An antenna, fencing around it would not be feasible, or would definitely not be feasible, and also would probably impact the safety of the structure itself
Okay.
and the safety of those who are around it.
I have no further questions of Mr. Ozer or Mr. O'Keefe at this time. If the board has any questions.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Questions, Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Schubert, one of the things that I did not see in the lease agreement or anywhere else in your submittal is required by the property owner to submit a letter giving you permission to be here. Would you accept that as a condition for the approval?
Yes, that would be acceptable.
And let me just educate myself here a little bit, Mr. Oster. Is this what's considered a 5G antenna?
Yes, sir, it is. On the second nature down, what Kevin O'Keefe referred to as the power heads, that is the 5G antenna. Whether or not it will be activated on this site is up to AT&T. We include it all on the plans and deal with the radio frequency, of which you'll hear from Mr. Peterson very shortly. We include them on all plans because in the very near future, all the sites will be active on the 5G. But right now, it is all of them are not going to be put into effect right now. But the facility is and will have it available for use immediately.
The next question, again, I don't know who named this a stealth pole, but you're going to be able to see that forever. So it's not very stealthy as we go by a common definition there. Moving on, the variance for the height request, is anybody want to answer that, or do you agree that you need that variance?
I would, my next witness, Mr. Peterson, would be able, I think, to testify to that as to the effect of dropping down the antenna by a foot.
Go ahead.
Mr. Peterson?
No.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
Well, let's hold off on that question until you get into the next witness. Let's just finish the questions for these witnesses.
What about the variance that I suggested you may need for the climbing, to prevent climbing?
Sir, in reference to that,
40-foot. I think that relates to the 40-foot requirement. Because if it's over 40 foot,
Okay, so
then
they'll
they
drop
would
it
need
below.
anti-climbing.
I'm good for now.
Any other questions?
I have none.
Colin, any questions of the witnesses? Jason?
No.
Any,
Oh, I do. Hold on. I do. I'm sorry.
excuse me, Mr. Hess?
I think it was Mr. O'Keefe. You said that you approached three property owners. Which properties did you approach?
Sorry for the delay. There were the property directly next door in this parking lot here, and then there was two properties behind that. Off the top of my head, I do not have those names, but give me a minute, I may be able to find it.
Can I interrupt her?
There was two properties in the alleyway directly behind that.
Kevin, this is Mike here, and to the board. Dynatech Controls was one that I actually approached, and I believe Kevin approached that again, and there was no interest when I did it. And Kevin, I believe Kevin approached that one again as well, off of Catherine Street.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Hanson?
What about the property just north of the railroad tracks and to the east, which would put it behind the Sunoco station? There used to be an old mill there. Has anybody approached in that area?
Sir, I can answer that one. Basically, that was outside of the direct, outside of the parameters that I was given for the search ring, as the small cell site is a very limited capacity, and that area there, basically for what the radio frequency pin was supposed to do was not effective. On a verbal, I approached the zone of the radio frequency and said, "Will this work?" He did a fast reply while I was out there. The answer was no. So I can testify to that it was approached, but because of the location and what the initial pin was for this facility to tie into the macro sites, of which Mr. Peterson will give testimony on shortly, that area was not satisfactory to radio frequency.
Let me ask one follow-up question to that. And again, this may show my ignorance here, but having been to several large cities where they're using 5G technology, most of those antennas are below the electric lines and they're in the area of the phone and cable lines are slightly below. Now, I know that would probably require several of those in the area, but wouldn't that be a more effective alternative than just one?
Sir, I tell you what, that question I can answer you, but the engineer that we have on staff for this evening, Dale Kelman, he is very familiar as he designs the networks in reference to the facilities that go on utility poles. He would be the best one to question that to answer that question. I can, but I don't have the engineering degrees after me to answer that.
And
He
that's
does.
That's fine. Let him answer it then.
And actually, I think maybe the radio frequency engineer, Mr. Peterson, could talk about that too.
Anything else, Mr. Hanson? Okay. Mr. Beck, is there anybody on the Zoom that has questions for these witnesses?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Schubert, would you like to call your next witness?
Thank you. Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
you've been sworn, and your CV is marked as applicant's exhibit A13. Can you please let the board know what it is you do and confirm that you're licensed with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and your experience?
Sure, I'm a radio frequency design engineer. My firm is DBM Engineering. This is Andrew Peterson speaking for the record. I have undergraduate and graduate degrees in electrical engineering from Lehigh University. I'm a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as a handful of surrounding states. And I've been involved in the design of cellular networks for over 2 decades at this point, having testified a few hundred times before various municipal boards like this one, also in federal court, county court, state courts, as an expert witness in these types of matters.
And have you testified in other municipal proceedings such as this in Lancaster County?
I have on many occasions.
And you've been accepted as a radio frequency expert with regard to testifying and rendering an expert opinion on site design and layout of a wireless network. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And also with regard to small cell design.
That's correct, yes.
Does the board recognize Mr. Peterson as an expert in radio frequency design?
I will recognize Mr. Peterson as an expert witness if he gives his address.
My physical address is 3230 Water Street Road, Collegeville, Pennsylvania. Business address is on the CV at Box 165, Fairview Village.
Thank you. Yes, we'll recognize him as an expert.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Peterson, AT&T is a wireless provider licensed by the FCC, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And I've marked as applicants Exhibit A8, a series of licenses. Are these the licenses that are held by AT&T in Lancaster County?
I don't see them up on the screen yet, but I do have an advanced copy of the, yes, I do see them now. Yes, these are reference copies of a collection of the licenses that AT&T has in Lancaster County that would also cover this area.
Now, what do these licenses authorize AT&T to do?
They authorize the use of very specific set of frequency pairs, so a specific portion or portions of the radio frequency band. They span the 700 megahertz band all the way up to the 2300 megahertz band and multiple bands in between, including 850, 1900, 1700, 2100, all in terms of megahertz. There are also 39 gigahertz license that AT&T also has.
Now, as part of its licensure, is AT&T expected to adhere to all the rules and regulations of the Federal Communications Commission?
They are. They're required to adhere to all the rules and regulations, specifically with interference and strength of their emissions, their power output, and also in keeping their transmissions within the bands that they're licensed.
And is AT&T expected to meet some sort of mandate as part of this licensure? And if so, what is that mandate?
They are. They're required by the FCC to maintain reasonably reliable coverage. That's the ability of AT&T subscribers to make, maintain, and receive voice calls, also to make, maintain, receive data sessions with reasonable throughput.
1 second, please. Excuse me. What'd you say? Okay. The court reporter asked that you slow down just a little bit. She's having a hard time hearing and following everything, so please comply.
I will. I'll slow down.
And I don't know, Mr. Peterson, if it's possible to get a little closer to your computer's mic as well. Now, you were also, I'm sorry, I'm not, did you finish the answer to that question, Mr. Peterson?
I did.
Okay.
If it was recorded, I could repeat if necessary.
Okay. And were you also called upon with regard to this application to prepare a radio frequency design report?
I was.
And did you complete that task?
I did.
And marked as applicants Exhibit A9 is a report that was authored by you dated October 16 of 2020. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what was the purpose of this report? What did you analyze and what were your conclusions?
So the purpose of this report really is to summarize the radio frequency design aspects of the project. In particular, what the issue is that AT&T is facing here and how this design facility will address that issue. So in this case, we have an area, if we can flip to the third page, I think.
Yeah, page 3.
Yes. This is first and foremost a map of the area where the proposal is designed for. You can see Marietta Ave and Rohrerstown Road, the intersection there, and the icon there that is the location of the proposed facility. There's some other typical map features, roadways, municipal boundaries. The more local roadways are also shown, although they're a bit washed out. And I'll get to what all the coloring is in a moment. Besides that, we have 2 other locations. These are AT&T existing macro sites, one called Centerville, which is in the southwest corner, one called Cabbage Hill, which is in the southeast corner. These are existing AT&T macro sites, so traditional tower sites. More specifically, Centerville is a lattice type structure. AT&T's antennas are around 100 feet on that lattice structure. And then the Cabbage Hill site is a monopole, so a monolithic steel tubular structure. The antennas, the AT&T antennas are about 120 feet. And those are the 2 closest AT&T facilities. They're macro sites that are currently serving the AT&T subscribers in the area. The shading that you see is what I found is the best way to illustrate the capacity offload capabilities of these small cells. And I'll talk about exactly what I mean by that, but just by way of information here, the shading represents the best server footprints of the various sectors of the existing sites. So I know that's a mouthful. What that means is the existing sites have multiple antenna arrays that point in distinct directions. You can think of them as flashlights, maglite flashlights, where we can adjust the beams, much like you can adjust the intensity of a beam of a maglite flashlight by twisting and then increasing or decreasing the distance from the mirror to the actual bulb. In much the same way, we can direct the radio frequency energy from these types of facilities. And we do this with panel style antennas, and further we do this by arranging them in arrays that point in specific directions. So by way of example, if we look at the Cabbage Hill site to the southeast, you'll see that there are 3 distinct colors surrounding it. We've got green pointing north, northeast, a gray pointing southeast, and what's almost a purple pointing west. Those 3 colors, they're not really indicating any difference in the coverage threshold or any type of technological difference in the coverage. They're just there to distinguish the coverage areas from those 3 sectors. So the northerly facing green sector is producing that green footprint and so on. In a similar fashion, if we look at the Centerville site, you'll notice the blue northeasterly facing sector producing that blue coverage footprint. So if we then zoom into the area surrounding the proposed facility, which is on top of the Rohrerstown label and has the long name beginning in CRAN RPHL, that's just the internal name for this small cell facility. You can see that not so coincidentally, it's in an area that is really surrounded by a confluence of a variety of colors, two of which we can easily see are emanating from the two sites to the south, and then a few others that are kind of getting in there in a varying degree from some of the other sites that are off screen. And this is important to note because we can tell in this area, we have a lot of servers, so a lot of sectors that are getting into the area, but none that is really blanketing that area in a whole. Centerville, the northeasterly sector of Centerville is clearly the most dominant, but we do have this confluence of different colors there, and a lot of kind of scatter of coverage from those different colors that get in there. So this is what I'd term as a seam of the network, where we have a lot of different servers getting into an area. And it's also a relatively busy area. So we have some commercial uses, industrial uses there at this corner, where they're in normal times, lately probably not as much as usual, but under normal circumstances that I hope to get back to soon, this is likely a very busy area where you have folks utilizing those services there. There's a gas station, bank, the automotive shop, the motorcycle shop here in this area, and lots of other uses surrounding it. So a relatively busy area where we have a confluence of servers getting in is exactly where we like to put these small cells. And the point of that is to absorb the traffic. When I say traffic, the cellular data traffic specifically, and the voice traffic, but it's really the data traffic that puts the most strain on the network. When we have a concentration of users in an area like this on the scheme of a network that is distant from the surrounding sites, the closest surrounding site here is over a mile and a half away. So by today's standards, that's relatively distant to have a traffic center. We like to offload that traffic with these small cells. What that does is it absorbs the traffic that's going to be, if we then flip to the next page, which is the proposed coverage from this site. So if the site's approved, with the antenna topping out at 41 feet, will produce this nice this new yellow coverage area surrounding the site, which is going to absorb the traffic from that intersection and the surrounding areas. It's going to, as a whole, improve the network in the area, not just within the yellow footprint, but it's going to allow the blue footprint of coverage from Centerville to operate more efficiently, to better allocate its limited resources and limited power, because the folks that are distant from it won't be absorbing so much of that power. It's going to do that for all of the surrounding sites, as they'll no longer struggle to reach into this distant area and provide service to AT&T customers there. It's going to allow not only the area of yellow coverage to perform more efficiently, but the network as a whole in its surroundings. To touch on the question that came up earlier, we'd be willing to drop the foot and center line. It will impact the yellow coverage footprint here to a small degree. It will impact it. It will shrink it, even just a foot of decrease. But AT&T radio frequency, internal radio frequency, would not have an issue with a foot decrease. Although I would say that with respect to the anti-climbing device installation requirement, that is a typical requirement we see on macro sites, and what we do in that case is we remove the climbing pegs on the first 20 feet of the tower. Then that acts as, in a way, an anti-climbing device, if you will. And of course, this facility is not proposed with any climbing pegs. So if that meets the requirement, or would somehow have amount to that requirement being somehow waived, I would offer that as testimony that there would be no climbing pegs.
Now, Mr. Peterson, You talked about the seam or the location between the surrounding macro sites, Centerville and the other site, Millersville, Cabbage Hill to the southeast. How much flexibility do you have in moving the location of these small cell sites to address that seam where you have the confluence of different macro sites coming together?
Well, in a case like this, we're really targeting the intersection. So as you can see, we have a limited coverage footprint from these facilities. And as we move it, if we were to move it away from the intersection, we'd really be limiting its ability to offer coverage and added capacity into the intersection. So we don't have a lot of that flexibility. We need to be proximate, within a few properties of the intersection for it to function adequately. The coverage radius from one of these types of facilities is intentionally very small. We don't want them to absorb or attempt to absorb more traffic than they can handle. So moving even just a few properties, depending on the size of the property, away from the intended area of offload and improved coverage will really hurt the design here. So for that reason, there's not a whole lot of flexibility with the PIN, as Mr. Rocha put it, where these facilities are designed in an ideal situation, and then where they actually where we can actually find a workable candidate. There's just not a lot of flexibility.
So what if you were to relocate the site to the other side of the railroad tracks north by 500 feet? Would that pull this coverage away from the targeted area and this confluence or seams, as you characterized it, between the macro sites?
It would be a great detriment to design if we were to move it on the other side of the railroad tracks there. It's not an exact one-for-one, but as you move that site, let's say 500 feet north or northwest there, that coverage footprint would come along for the ride. It would really, almost in a one-for-one fashion, depending on the terrain and the surrounding environmental and man-made clutter, it would move probably close to that 500 feet in time. So it's pretty obvious that we would really be moving the center and even the edges of that coverage footprint pretty significantly and moving it out of the intended area almost entirely.
And can you talk briefly as to how the demand for wireless technology, and especially the demand for data, has driven the need for these small cell sites, or what would be characterized as capacity offloading sites?
Sure. Since the advent of the smartphone in about 2007, 2008, we've been on this exponential growth curve of increased data usage in particular. And as the iterations of cellular technology have improved over those years since, with 3G, then 4G LTE, and now 5G technologies, at every stage, the subscriber demand has grown into the capability very quickly. So it's been on that growth curve now for over a decade, and the folks that look at this in a globally speaking, there's really no end in sight as far as that growth. It's a you build it and they come type of thing, it seems, where the applications that folks are ready to deploy on these networks are just waiting for the speeds and latencies to get to the point where those applications work. And as soon as the network infrastructure is there, it seems there's the next big application that pushes data usage even further. So that's been really what's been driving the demand is really data usage, voice usage. Relatively speaking, requires very little ones and zeros data transmission relative to business use of the data networks, entertainment use of the data networks. I think we're all very familiar with the myriad of applications that are out there, that are very data hungry applications.
Okay. And in terms of emergency services, how important are these offloading or small cell sites, especially along busier roads in a given municipality?
Well, it's estimated now that 80% of 911 calls come from wireless devices. So when someone is injured or witnesses an accident or is injured so badly they can't even speak, as long as they are able to make that 911 call, the advanced 911 or enhanced 911 service, I should say, is now able to locate them, even if they can't locate themselves, to the dispatch center with some surprisingly good granularity to get them the emergency service that they need. Beyond that, it's often the case that municipal and state agencies, law enforcement agencies and otherwise use these types of devices, wireless devices, as sometimes they're primary, but oftentimes they're secondary communication network. Many times when law enforcement pulls folks over, using air cards to look up license plates, things of that nature. I've heard anecdotally and seen firsthand that use is very common in law enforcement, and of course depends on having adequate data services to do that. So it's critical from an emergency services standpoint.
Okay. Now, are you familiar with the term co-location?
I am, yes.
Now, for this type of small cell facility, which is defined as a small cell wireless facility, a stealth facility under the Township Wireless Ordinance, what is the technical feasibility of co-location, or are there any limitations with regard to the ability of co-locating on these types of facilities?
Yeah, generally speaking, small cells don't lend themselves to co-location. That's for a number of reasons. First of all, as with the design here, AT&T is requiring a pole top antenna, and that's typical with the providers. They like to have what we call a cantenna, which is about the size of a 5-gallon bucket, placed atop the pole, in this case painted to match and stealth in that manner to match the monolithic appearance of the pole. But there's only one top of the pole, and these type of cantennas can't be mounted one on top of another. So from that perspective, these structures really are limited from a co-location perspective. So really only one provider can have that pole top real estate. So that makes it difficult. Beyond that, there is a industry standard separation of 10 feet between antennas. That's been the empirically proven distance as far as mitigating any type of interference concerns. So with a structure like this, where we have an antenna proposed now around 40 feet and another 5G antenna proposed below that, and the next provider may need a couple center lines, assuming that they can somehow avoid the use of the antenna, and they would need to separate accordingly. So you quickly run out of vertical real estate. So that's another reason. And then beyond that, as we have a shrouded equipment cabinet, any other provider would have that, as well as potentially a meter for electric and some other attachments. So this type of pole that we are trying to stealth and create this monolithic appearance of would quickly become filled up and jumbled up, and really lose any of the aesthetic appeal that it has with its current proposal. So for those reasons, co-location of these facilities really, they don't lend themselves to co-location, and I haven't worked on any that were co-located types of facilities when it comes to small cell.
And would you agree then, based upon that assessment, that with regard to this particular small cell, that co-location would not be technically feasible to maintain those qualities of stealthing and the height design as proposed?
Yes, I'd agree with that.
Okay. Now, you indicated that you would be able to drop this antenna height down to 40 feet to comply with the underlying ordinance. And based upon that reduction in height, do you have an opinion as to whether, I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Do you have an opinion as to whether that would be the minimum functional height that you would like to see this facility?
It would, yes. I'm hesitant even to, lose a foot because the design height here was chosen for a reason. However, knowing now that there is that requirement, which would then create some more relief that would be required, I don't see any issue with dropping it a foot. Although there would be a small difference in the coverage footprint here. And in particular, beyond what we're seeing here, also with the 5G would then likely have to drop a foot in kind. So we'd be losing a little bit of coverage footprint with both, but I would not want to drop any further. It would become a significant degradation in service.
And the ordinance also requires consideration of compliance with regard to radio wave emissions from the site, as well as a consideration of whether the site will cause any interference. Did you do a separate analysis of those issues?
I did.
And I'd like to direct your attention and the board's attention to applicant's exhibit A10.
Mr. Schubert, real quick, the last exhibit that we were talking about, the radio frequency design analysis, that you marked as 9?
Correct.
Thank you.
Was the FCC license, was that an exhibit?
It was, the summary of the licenses was A8.
A8, okay.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Now, Mr. Peterson, projected in front of you is a report that I believe you authored, which is dated October 15, last week. And it's entitled Subject FCC Compliance Analysis. Did you in fact prepare this report?
Yes.
And what was the purpose of this report and what did you conclude?
So in this report, I look at two important compliance pieces with respect to the proposed facility. One being the anticipated emissions and how that measures up to the standards set forth by the FCC. And also I look at the facility from a potential for any harmful interference as a result of the proposal and the proposed frequencies that are to be installed. On the emissions piece, I analyze all areas of public access, not just the ground level public access for folks that could be walking or driving by, but also any elevated positions where, let's say, someone working on the rooftop of the garage or in an adjacent building who may not know that they're now a little bit higher up from the ground and therefore closer to the antennas could access those elevated positions. And in the case of this facility and the specific areas surrounding the general public, we engaged at the exposure levels that are allowable to the general public, we'd be less than 3%, in fact, less than 2.7% of the applicable FCC standard at those locations on ground level. And then at any areas of elevated height, specifically on the adjacent rooftop, we'd be less than 8.9% of the allowable FCC exposure levels. And I should also mention that these calculations are done in accordance with FCC OET 65, which is Office of Engineering Technology, Bulletin 65, which basically lays out the guidelines and the equation folks like myself use to evaluate the anticipated exposure levels from these types of facilities. And then with respect to the interference, as I mentioned before, AT&T will only utilize portions of the radio frequency spectrum in which they're licensed and only at the appropriate power levels for which they're licensed. So by virtue of that licensure, there'll be no overlap in channels with any other users of the radio frequency spectrum, including AM/FM broadcast, television broadcast, garage door openers, baby monitors, Wi-Fi hotspots, things of that nature that are also licensed by the FCC to operate in separate portions of the radio frequency spectrum.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. And then with regard to the issue of noise, any concern with regard to noise from this type of facility, especially realizing that it is adjacent to fairly busy roads?
No concern. The radio equipment would have, some fans similar to what a household computer or a laptop would have. So there's no generator being proposed or anything else that would cause a significant noise level. Nothing that you'd even really be able to hear from ground.
Okay. And Mr. Peterson, if this facility is not approved by the board, would that in any way materially inhibit AT&T's ability of providing the capacity offloading that it is seeking for its network to improve the wireless network for its customers?
It would. It would be an inhibition of that ability by AT&T to provide for its subscribers.
And so this facility would be necessary for the reasons you stated and also summarized in your design analysis?
That's correct.
I have no further questions of Mr. Peterson at this time.
Okay, gentlemen, Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Peterson, going to page 4 of that letter we just looked at, the coverage area. So basically, with this new tower, you're gaining basically coverage 1 block to the north, 1 block to the west, 2 blocks to the east, 2 blocks to the south. Is that about correct?
Yes, those are the areas, roughly speaking, those are the areas where this facility will be the dominant server before we do some optimization. And there's always optimization post-construction and integration. So perhaps we'll pull back the coverage footprint of the Centerville site. I would anticipate that may be one of the optimization steps to kind of pull coverage out of there and let this site perhaps absorb a little bit more traffic. Because if we look at that figure 2 proposed capacity offload, we see that the coverage footprint is still somewhat encircled by Centerville. So that may be one of the optimization steps. But roughly speaking, it's as I mentioned, it's a modest coverage footprint, typically a radius of somewhere south of 1,000 feet of dominant coverage, and that's intentional, just by the nature of these types of facilities.
All right, just again to help me with my ignorance here. Being an AT&T subscriber, that's one of the few places in the township where I get great service. And looking at your coverage maps here and being on the zoning board for 16 plus years now, one thing I find with cell providers is I think your coverage maps are very over optimistic, because I can tell you where you have that blue there off the Centerville site, there's a lot of areas where I can't get any coverage. The applicant's A5, that would have been one of the pictures. As opposed to a pole, could not this antenna been located on the corner of the building and still give you coverage you needed?
So I think that Mike or Kevin did touch on the use of surrounding rooftops. But if you're referencing the existing rooftop of the motorcycle shop, it's significantly lower. It's maybe 15 feet. I don't have the exact figure in front of me.
But if you were to put it on, if you're looking at that photo, be the opposite side of the building on the corner there, that line of sight is straight down north and south and east. Yes, I agree. It may give you not as much coverage headed west, but wouldn't that be an option as opposed to a 40-foot pole?
What are you asking if building a structure on that rooftop to get us up to the 40-ish?
No, what I'm saying is, one of the things that the ordinance requires is that you explore other options for location. What I'm saying here is you got a 40-foot pole that you're going to see for blocks going in either direction because it doesn't blend in with the neighborhood at all. Could not that antenna be put on the corner of the building
So
at a lower height?
it is largely a line of sight technology. I mean, the energy and the bands that AT&T is licensed for will penetrate stick built structures, even glass and steel structures to a lesser extent. But if we were to drop that down to say the rooftop level, we'd really be limiting that line of sight. It cuts both ways. Yes, it is more visually impactful when we propose a 40-foot structure, but because we can see it from a lot of the surrounding areas, it can also see into those areas and then provide that coverage footprint. So if we were to drop it, we would be affecting that coverage footprint dramatically, and that very modest yellow best server area would shrink dramatically. We really wouldn't be able to see much past the surrounding buildings. I understand what you're saying. Maybe up and down the roads there would be some tunneling. But for the most part, we're not really trying to offload the cars that are kind of up and down the roads. It's really getting into and over some of the nearby buildings where there is a concentration of the traffic, the cellular traffic. So it would be just way too short of a site.
All right, one question, and Mr. Schubert, I don't know if you have an engineer on the poll coming up, or do you?
I do.
I'll wait till he testifies.
Okay.
Nope.
Any questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Lewis?
one quick question. If it was lowered a foot, would that affect the exposure levels of the ground?
No, I mean, not significantly. There are multiple levels or multiple assumptions that I make when I perform the calculations that OET 65 prescribes. One of those is what I do is I imagine that the ground is actually a mirrored surface, which doubles the doubles the incident power on a passerby, quadrupling the power density. So the power density is actually the measuring stick that the FCC guidelines are written in, which is microwatts per centimeter squared. So just by that single assumption, we're quadrupling the output yield from the calculation. When we drop a foot, there would be a tiny impact on those numbers. And in fact, what I do, I always look at the lowest antenna center line. So what I've already done, and this is another conservative approach that I take, what I've already done is mathematically, I've relocated the 4G radio output down to the 5G radio level. So the results you're seeing in that report are actually running this poll as if all those radios were down at the 5G level. And I do that, again, in an abundance of caution, just to overestimate rather than in any way underestimate the power levels at ground level or adjacent rooftop levels. So in that assumption alone, we've already artificially dropped the antenna center line a few feet. So I would anticipate a negligible increase in the ground level exposure. Certainly nothing that would amount to an exposure level in excess of the allowable limits.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Got any questions? No. Colin, questions of the witness? No. Jason?
Yeah, I have one on the report. I think it was A10, the FCC compliance analysis. On page 2, with regard to co-location, at the bottom of that paragraph, you say that AT&T equipment would in no way preclude the use of this facility by other providers. So are you saying there that in terms of the frequency, it wouldn't interfere, but you also said it's not technically feasible?
So at the beginning of that sentence reads, from the standpoint of radio frequency exposure. And from that standpoint only is what's meant by that sentence. If we were to somehow get beyond all the issues that I mentioned earlier, as far as having one pole top, having 10-foot typical separation, having a lot of equipment cabinets, perhaps. If we were to somehow get, let's say, Verizon or T-Mobile onto this pole at a height that they would find acceptable, and predicting that height or how that would make the tower then grow, of course we can't do that. But if we were to somehow do that and the output levels were triple, let's say, or quadruple, what I mean by that is, from that perspective of exposure, the AT&T equipment does not preclude the use of the facility. So if we were to say triple the exposure level here, we would, let's say, go from 9% to 27% or somewhere around there of the FCC standards. And that's, the worst case assumptions at adjacent rooftop height, et cetera. That's all that's meant by that sentence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else on Zoom have any questions of this witness? If so, John's saying nobody has put any questions there. So with that, we'll thank you. And Mr. Schubert, at this time, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I don't know about you guys, but we need to stand a little bit and give the court reporter a couple-minute break. So we're going off the record now for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Whoever is sitting in one spot is not good for old bodies.
The problem is, and this is where these properties now. We want to say more than they should come from.
Oh.
Same. Speaker, yeah. Okay. Before- One right here, yeah, we could do it.
You at Rapid earlier this month? Okay.
tell you, I'm gonna probably be there the next one.
Are you? I was having a hard time hearing him too. I don't think his microphone was right. I was having a hard time. Yeah. So I don't even have physical copies of everything yet. So like we don't have physical copies of that street view. We don't have physical copy of the deed or. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just take some stickers and I mean, I can probably.
Yeah, I mean, I put my initials.
I don't know if maybe one's just their application. I don't know. They're not, because the one I think he said was 13. The CV.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'll just put the numbers on. Cause I'll have to go through. Oh. Or I guess maybe we could go ahead and.
In other parts of the country, there are actually still antennas. Look like trees.
Yeah, I've
They're
seen
not
them.
a very good approximation. They
Right.
look like tall pine trees.
Yeah.
Better than
11, 12, and 13.
The little pole sticking up in the middle of anything too. Yeah, it looks more like nature. It's adapting it more.
doesn't look much better or worse than a telephone pole.
Right, right.
Somebody.
I still don't. For the life of me, I can't understand why the electric power grid was wires from wood poles.
Agreed. Agreed.
You know
I
that
mean, our
every
neighborhood
time
is all
there's a wind,
underground, but
Every time there's a wind,
yep,
you're gonna lose power.
yep. That's why we don't ever lose any.
This is crazy.
I go on the walks up in, I live up in, up Nope. What's that?
What's not true? Oh, yes, I'm there.
Well, right. Yes.
With them on somewhere else, but the point is, why aren't we putting more of it underground along highways
Here are the names right there.
and getting it out of the.
They don't want to pay to do it, unfortunately. But you're
Not
right.
even a quick-
New development.
Yeah.
Someone called him
Count
because they're
sending people around to cut back the trees from the wires, replacing the wires, replacing the poles when they get hit by a truck.
Yep.
Yeah, they just.
Yep.
Can't believe the economics.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that's one
Because they don't,
question
because
I have.
whoever's in charge right now doesn't want to spend that
One-
money and have
I'm
that
guessing
on their.
one is just the application, but we should ask him.
Yeah.
Two is, he said what two is.
No, we'd rather bury them.
I didn't get it.
Two's the street view.
That's,
Who's the street view?
Opened up in the parking lot of the big factory.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
130.
The sheets up here at Espenshade Road,
and then I got the rest.
pipeline's back behind there. You know, they've been up there 4 times.
Site acquisition statement,
Pipeline.
Really? That's so scary.
They're on Strickler Road. We're across the Strickler Road on either side. Matter of fact, the
I
one
think he said that it's,
where they
the
Core
engineer
drill.
CV was 813.
283. Look on the right, if you're headed eastbound, right before you get to Espenshade Road exit, there's a patch there. They fixed that twice now.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's an underlying deal.
I understand why you put a pipeline in a prop where the geological structure.
But he missed.
Could have missed it.
At some
It's
point
common
in the
knowledge
design.
by everybody
Yeah,
up
he said
there.
13, so we still don't know
I
what.
don't understand how
Rabbit
Rafford
Hill.
That might be the last.
The Rafford
Probably the
Township roads
pole,
are still
structural
as for years.
reports, right.
I should. That I own property down there. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. No, I see, I'm just looking at this picture right here. Back toward the building, it looks a lot better right there.
And the ordinance.
And then when
You're
they,
not gonna make that building.
Yeah. And then the
no, I just meant the view was a little bit,
You know that Mike O'Brien to buy up all of that area.
I didn't find it.
but now you're putting,
No, I definitely did. I didn't find anything. Yeah, no.
What happened?
For the snow.
We'll go back on the record as soon as Mr. Beck's back. He went to download or make copy of the exhibits so they can be properly marked.
no. I did look at the score though. We stopped here. Dallas is already down too.
That's
What's that?
I said Dallas is down big time
How,
too.
how bad?
14-0 early. Zeke fumbled twice.
Quarterbacking for them.
Andy Dalton. They're in first place. That's what they said. Let's face it, whoever the NFC East is gonna get into the playoffs with a losing record again.
It's amazing how, from
I just saw
powerhouse,
them, I saw them on the agenda.
all the NFL, to one of the worst.
It's because they were not putting the money in there. They don't
What's that?
draft well anymore.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
ownership. They don't
Oh,
draft
yeah.
well, they don't pay well, they don't do anything. I mean, they got Wentz and they expect he's gonna do everything in there, and yet they don't have anybody else
Well, they
helping him
made-
out.
I said this. I
And
said this.
Dallas is
first
the ownership.
year Wentz was- I'm getting rid of.
Yeah?
They should
Yeah.
get rid of Wentz.
Well,
Yeah, he did.
He's printing them out right now.
Great
He'll
freshman year.
be able to give you a copy of that.
I don't think he's still a problem in there. I think it's the fact that they can't. Yeah. Put in Jalen Hurts, see what happens with him.
I'm happy with my team. I'm the other side of this thing.
Pittsburgh.
Oh, geez, they're Super Bowl bound.
They are.
The way they're going.
The last time they went 5-0.
Let's see what happens against
The last
Tennessee.
time they won a Super Bowl.
Guess why guess what's different on that team this year?
Have won
Roethlisberger's
They
back.
got rid of all the problem children.
Yep.
Yes, but they also captured Roethlisberger.
They had,
They've got a great defense, offensive line. Good defense.
they always have.
And they got rid of their problem children.
Claypool is amazing, but but the reason. But he's got all the time in the world. Roethlisberger doesn't have to scramble. It's just what Mark was saying. It's the line. The line is helping him out. I mean, you look at Tennessee right now too. I mean, he's playing great. Why? Because nobody can get to him.
Ready?
That's right. We gotta go do work.
Okay, this time we will go back on the record. Mr. Schubert, if you're there.
I'm in the ether here.
Okay.
All right.
One quick question before, this is just record keeping. Your Exhibit 1, what was that?
That was the application
Okay.
incorporated by reference.
Okay. That's made part of the record anyway, but that's fine. And I presume you have 2 other exhibits yet you have not brought up,
That's correct.
11 and 12.
11 and 12.
Okay, and now that I'm semi back in order, would you like to call your next witness?
Sure, that would be Dale Kellman.
Sorry, you say Kelman?
Correct.
Yeah.
Kellman. Dale, you on board?
I'm here.
Great. Dale, if you could state your name and business address for the record and what you do.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dale Kellman. I am a engineering manager / project manager here on the AT&T project for network building and consulting. My current address is 3208 Hayes, Hayes Road in Norristown, PA 19403.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Kellman, could you give the board a little bit of an idea of what you do as an engineering manager for these types of projects and your experience in that regard?
Yes. So basically what I do is I basically coordinate all engineering on these projects with the different disciplines within our office, with our wireless, our civil disciplines, and our structural disciplines. Coordinate the production of all engineering and construction documents, the construction drawings which were submitted as part of the application, and also any sort of structural reports analyses that are associated with that.
Okay. And how much experience do you have in terms of performing those duties?
I have over 15 years or so of experience.
Okay. And what about with regard to small cell sites in particular?
So I've been working on small cell sites for I'll say the past 4 to 5 years now.
All right. And the type of site that is proposed here, I've been calling it a stealth design. Would you agree that this is a stealth design? And if so, what are some of the features that establish it as such?
Yes, I mean, I would consider this is a stealth design in that it is designed to mimic, you know, a light structure. All of the elements of that support the major elements that support the facility, such as the utilities that run to the facility, and the coax runs that feed the antennas, they're all concealed within the pole. The antennas themselves also will be, provided with some sort of concealment to make them look as if they're integrated into the pole itself.
Okay. And in terms of placement of this type of structure in relation to the surrounding area, oh, and let me ask you this question first. I take it you've been out to the surrounding area?
Yes.
And you're familiar with that intersection, the property, and some of the properties adjoining?
Yes.
Now, in terms of that familiarity and what is out there currently, in terms of other utility type structures, do you have an opinion as to whether or not this type of facility would fit within some of those other type utility structures in the area? And if so, what would that opinion be?
Yeah, definitely. I believe that it would definitely fit in within the area. Most of the existing utility wood poles there are at or just above 40 feet in height. So when you're looking around the area, it definitely would not stick out. It would definitely blend in with the existing structures that are of equal height.
And I note in the picture that is now up before the board, this is one of the photo simulations, which is applicant's exhibit A5. I note with some of those utility poles, it looks like there's a lot of wires, whether they're power wires or coaxial, that are strung off of those utility poles or that are seen in that picture. Is that correct?
Yeah, so those wires that you're seeing at the top of the utility pole are primary power wires. The next line down will be your secondary, and roughly within 4 feet of that secondary, you have your communication space.
Are any aerial wires proposed for the small cell facility that's proposed on the Jackson property?
Not going to the tower itself. However, at the rear of the property, if you can bring up the plan view.
Yep. So let me
sheet number.
ask for, this would be applicant's exhibit A11. And do you know what sheet it is, Mr. Kelman?
Yeah, sheet number 3 of the PDF. So yes. So if you look at the, I'll say that's the northwest corner of the building. No, sorry, northeast corner of the building. You can see some overhead wires coming from a utility pole. That's labeled number 58907. Sorry, 38907. Right now, there's an existing overhead wire coming to the building. I believe that provides electricity to the building. So we're proposing to follow that path. There's an existing meter socket at the back of the building. I believe it's a 2-gang meter socket, one that's currently being occupied by the meter that serves the building. Our intention is to either use that existing meter socket if possible, or go ahead with a new socket, replace that with a new socket as we show in the drawings. That power service will come overhead, following the existing location and going to that meter, and then follow around connected to the building in conduit to our structure. In addition to that overhead power, there will be overhead fiber that will also be coming directly to the building. Once it reaches the building, it will be going inside conduit, which will follow along to the front of the building with the power, and then underground into the pole.
Okay, so again, if I understand, the electrical conduit and fiber would follow the wall of the building?
Yes.
And
if
then-
you bring up the exhibit, back to the lease exhibit again. Sorry, so back to the photo sim. We can show you exactly how that goes.
It was A5.
So if you look on the wall in the photo sim, and it's rendered to be the same color of the wall, you see those 2 lines running there. The lower one has a disconnect on it that appears to be the power, and then the upper one appears to be the fiber line that will be going down, and then it will run underground under the pavement, and then up into the pole, into the backpack or cabin that's attached to the pole.
Okay. And what material is the pole going to be constructed of?
It will be a steel pole.
And are there any particular codes that apply to this type of facility?
Yeah, so in particular here, just because we're using as a cellular facility, we're required to follow the ANSI TIA 222 code. And
all right, so that's for the court reporter, that's ANSI, ANSI/TIA.
Yep.
222.
Yep.
Okay. And are the listed codes on the plans as well, on the title sheet of the plans?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So it's such things as the electrical code, the lightning protection code, the safety code, all those codes would be applicable to this type of structure. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And it is the intention of the applicant to comply with all those codes?
That's correct.
And would structural drawings be prepared for this structure that would be available for the township to review?
Yes. Yeah, structural drawings of the pole itself, detailing the exact material makeup of the pole, the anchorage, and the foundation design will be can be made available to be for the township to review.
And at what point would that be done in the process?
Typically, after we get our zoning approval, we request that those drawings be provided earlier if possible too as well.
And would that be submitted as part of the building permit review?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in terms of this placement of the pole, let me ask you this question first. If this pole is designed, manufactured, constructed, and maintained in accordance with those codes, is there any practical concern regarding structural failure of that pole?
No. I mean, again, it's, you guys are, these requirements for this type of facility are very are strict requirements. These are intended for large 150-foot towers. We're applying this to a 40-foot tall light pole. So these light poles are really over-designed.
Okay.
What they're being what's being proposed.
Okay. Now, if we can go back to the enlarged site plan view, which is sheet 4 of Exhibit A11, I believe it's the fourth page of the PDF document. Yeah. Now, Mr. Kelman, do you see that site plan in front of you on your computer?
Yes.
Now, can you describe where the existing pole is and where the proposed pole is in relation to the side property line and where that property line is indicated?
Okay, so basically the existing pole is located in the front of the property, just off of our Marietta Avenue. The existing pole is roughly 4 feet from the property line to the face of the pole. The proposed pole would be installed just in front of that existing pole, roughly 21 and a half feet offset from the curb line of Marietta Ave. And we maintain the same 4 feet offset from the side property line.
Okay. And obviously that would be within 5 feet radius of the existing pole?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of the location of the foundations, would the existing foundation, its current setback in relation to that side property line, also be consistent with the foundation for the proposed pole?
Yes.
Okay. And is there any concern from an engineering standpoint in terms of public health, safety, or welfare from locating this pole 4 feet from that property line?
No.
Now, in terms of doing the actual foundation investigation, there would be at some point a soil analysis that would have to be done?
For these cases, and that's something I can talk with more of my structural engineer, but we pretty much use the minimum bearing pressure as required by the ordinances in designing these poles. So, you know, a soil analysis is not necessarily needed for this foundation design. However, if one is required, you know, by the township, that's something we can definitely provide at a later date.
Okay, and that would be acceptable to AT&T if required by either the township engineer or the codes official?
Yes, with their permission. Once we receive their permission, yes.
Okay. And also with regard to these design standards, you had mentioned the ANSI, ANSI, that's the American National Standards Institute standards.
Yes.
They are designed and take effect of related wind gusts and ice loading for these types of structures. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, your testimony is it would be fully compliant with all those codes.
Correct.
Now, in terms of maintenance of these types of facility, can you touch upon that and discuss that with the board?
Yeah. So, I mean, these facilities require little to no maintenance. As I stated earlier, basically, you know, these sites are, you know, monitored remotely, and the only time that we anticipate any maintenance on the sites are, you know, if there's an outage, and that's when the tech would come out to investigate and see what's going on. Other than that, I mean, there's no real, you know, maintenance that is required on these.
And if maintenance is required because of some technical issues, would that maintenance be conducted in a workmanlike manner in compliance with all applicable codes?
Yes.
And based upon the placement of the structure, is there any concern with regard to any obstruction of vehicular traffic, pedestrians, or cyclist traffic along either of the roads?
No.
And in terms of the pole top, touching upon the ordinance requirement, is that antenna proposed to be flush mounted close to the top of that pole?
I know.
Sorry, I keep hearing someone talking in the
No,
background.
wouldn't that be cool?
That sounds like somebody's mic is up. Would that pole top be flush mounted as closely as top to the utility pole is technically feasible?
Sorry, flush mounted to the actual steel pole?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, repeat the question one more time, sorry.
The antenna itself, would that be flush mounted as close to the top of the pole as possible?
Yeah, it will be, yes, as close as possible. So basically, you have the top of a pole, which is what, at 38 feet 9 inches. In between the antenna and the pole will be a transition that would hide our, you know, the coax and any mounting devices that are used to attach the antenna.
Okay. And actually, I think we're going to be dropping the pole height by a foot to 37 feet 9 inches. Is that your understanding? And is that something that technically can be done?
Yes.
And in terms of the equipment cabinet, that had been indicated and shown on the photo simulation. What height is that going to be placed? And is that something that is the smallest size is technically feasible?
Yes. So right now, the bottom of that is going to be placed at 10 feet from ground level. As far as the size of that cabinet, yes, that size of cabinet, that cabinet has been specifically sized for the equipment that will be placed in that cabinet. So that pretty much is the smallest that we can get for that cabinet. It's pretty
Okay.
tight fit.
All right. And is that cabinet also going to be flush mounted to the side of the pole?
Yes.
And you touched upon this before, I think, but is any of the wiring going to be exposed?
So the design here is done to keep the wiring internal to the pole, and so that's what our team does here. Again, the utilities were purposely proposed to go underground instead of stringing from the building over to the pole to keep all of our cabling on the inside.
Okay. And is this facility to be fully automated and unattended? I mean, there won't be any sort of storage of any materials in and around the pole. Is that correct?
Correct.
And will maintenance utilize the best available technology available to AT&T?
Yes.
All right. And I believe, yes, a few more questions, Mr. Kelman. In terms of lighting, is any lighting proposed with this facility?
Not that's directly associated with the actual cell facility itself. However, the light that we are proposing here is really, on there is just a replacement to the light that is existing.
Okay, and that would be a downward cast light to illuminate the parking area.
Yep.
For that commercial operation at the property.
Correct.
All right. And what about parking for the maintenance technician? Is there any concern with regard to parking on that site?
No, there's plenty of parking that's available at the front of the building, should he need to, access for maintenance.
And is there any signage that's proposed with this application?
The only thing is there is a typical stickers that are identify the site number and emergency that is applied to the cabinet. Other than that, there's no signage outside of what's required by ordinance. By codes.
And just so we're clear with regard to the placement of this facility is currently placed over macadam. It's essentially a big parking area out front and onto the adjoining property. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that will not change in character with this proposed installation?
It will not, no.
Okay, I don't have any other, just one more question, Mr. Kelman.
Yep.
So again, if this facility is designed and maintained in accordance with those standards, is there any practical concern regarding any adverse effects on the public health, safety, or welfare?
No, there's no concern.
And do you believe that this application meets the remaining objective requirements of the ordinance in terms of providing such information as name, address, phone numbers of the applicant, address, location, height, those sorts of issues addressed in the site plans and or the application?
Yes.
Okay, I have no further questions, Mr. Kelman.
Mr. Schuman, what have you given us applicants exhibit number 12?
I'm sorry. I do have another question. Thank you. Mr. Kelman, applicant's exhibit A12 is entitled, it's an NB&C Engineering Services report entitled Proposed Steel Pole Antenna Installation.
Okay. Is that the
structural report?
Okay, yes.
This is the report dated June 25, 2020.
Yep.
I take it that you arranged and had your structural engineers prepare this report?
Yeah, yes.
And this is sealed off on by a structural engineer who's identified in the report?
Yes.
And what is the intention of submitting this report to the board?
Basically, is documentation that we have analyzed the structure, for the purpose of which we are proposing it, with the proposed appurtenances, and that it meets the requirements that are set forth in the applicable codes here.
Okay. Thank you. Now that's all the questions I have, promise.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelman, I have a question before I open it to the board. With applicant's exhibit 11, could you turn to page 5, please? Do you have that in front of you? It's what's up on the screen now, if you can see that.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Also, do you have a copy of the photos that were applicant's exhibit 5?
The photo sims.
The 4 photos that were part of applicant's
Yeah.
5.
Yeah, let me try to see if I can pull up a copy of those. Give me 1 second here. I have that, yes.
Okay, thank you. If you look at the third one, it's looking west from Roarstown Road towards the site, plus what you see in there is Roarstown Diner sign in that. It shows the existing light standard that's there. It also has the PennDOT traffic signal pole to the left side of the picture.
Yep.
Okay. If you look at that picture, and then look at the next picture, which does not have the light pole, but it has the 40-foot proposed tower, that tower looks a lot higher than that light pole. Would you agree?
Based on that, yes. I mean that light pole is definitely is possible that that light pole is shorter than the tower itself.
Okay, now go to the Exhibit 11, page 5, sheet 5, and it says on the right of the new tower, and I realize this is going to be changed, but by a foot, but it says height, antenna height, tip height, elevation 41 feet.
Yep.
On the left-hand side, it says the height of the top of the light is 40 feet 3 inches.
Yeah. So that's we saw that, I believe, after the fact that this was submitted, and we have a updated document which we can provide showing the correct height of the existing structure.
Okay, I would ask that document be submitted to the township and be made part of the record.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, if you look up on the screen, I don't have the document that you were referring to. The document that Attorney Schubert emailed Colin Seasoltz shows 41 feet for the top of the antenna tip height, and then it goes down top of pole 38 feet 9 inches.
Right.
Is there anywhere on the screen that resembles the document that you're referring to?
Well, you don't have the left-hand side of the document I'm referring to, which has existing light pole to be removed and replaced. There, that's what it is. That one shows that the existing light, top of the light, is 40 feet 3 inches, which.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. And so what I'm just saying is this 11 and 5 do not correspond to height. So, quick question for Jason. If that is being submitted, is that applicant's exhibit 14?
Was there something else that they're submitting after the fact? I couldn't remember.
No, Mr. Schubert, you have,
Yeah, just a suggestion to the board. What I could do, it sounds like at a minimum, we'd have to modify the height of that proposed pole and drop it down to 40 feet.
Right.
So it sounds like we would be submitting revised plans, and I'm happy to do that either as a condition with building permit, or if we want to leave the record open, I could submit it as a new exhibit A14, which would be revised site plans to address those two issues.
Jason?
Well, I mean, I guess if the board is going to conclude testimony tonight, then you can make it a condition that they submit revised plans. If not, and the board wishes to keep the record open, and testimony, not close testimony, then they could do the other option, which is keep that open.
Okay, we'll make that decision as we go on, but in either case, we will need revised plan, whether it's a revised plan as a condition of the decision or as applicant's exhibit 14. Gentlemen, other questions? Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Kelman, for numerous years I've sat on the zoning board, and I can't tell you how many zoning or cell phone cases I've heard over the years, but one of the things that was always apparent was what was considered a nationally accepted standard. Years ago, and it's been since rewritten, the zoning documents required the poles to be 150 feet or 150% of their height off the side and front yard and rear yard setbacks. That was since changed years ago to 100% of the height, and now it's 110. Are you telling me that we can put this 4 feet off and that pole is never going to collapse? Since it is a nationally accepted standard by cell phone companies, AT&T included in previous testimonies, that 100% was all we needed.
So, so there's always, yes, possibly the possibility of the pole collapsing. I mean, it's more, you know, if you have someone, you know, running and strike the pole. I mean, it's the same as if the pole was just a light that's there existing. There's a possibility of that. Also, someone running and striking the pole, it'll fall the same way. So I mean, with that said, there's always that possibility. You know, if the board's concern is with that pole falling onto the other property, there's some things that we could look at to ensure that pole collapses on itself and keeping the radius on which it falls. That's something I can, you know, talk to my engineer, you know, how we can design that to get that to happen. And that's been done in the past with larger poles. So if the concern is of that pole falling onto the other property and causing an issue, we can look at how we can design that to kind of reduce that risk.
How do you prevent a 40-foot pole from not falling on another property when it's only 4 feet off the line? I don't understand that one.
So basically, the pole can be designed, and again, I have to confirm this with my structure engineer, but they can design the pole where the material or the pole itself can be designed in sections where it can break at its midpoint and fall over on itself instead of breaking at the foundation and falling directly over. So it can be designed with either where it's split in two sections, or the material at that point is slightly weaker or thinner than the rest of the pole, so that the filling point is controlled to a certain area.
So, okay, somewhat similar to what a monopole would do, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so taking a look at the applicant's A5, picture looking at the proposed site from the west, looking east down Marietta Avenue.
Okay, give me a second here.
John. Yep, thank you. So even if that pole splits in half, or comes down, bends in half and comes down, it's going to damage cars that are on the neighboring property. Correct? There's a chance of that happening.
If there's a car parked there, I would say yes, there's a chance of that happening, yes.
Okay. So this area, the county in general is prolonged to straight line winds at 80, in excess of 80 miles an hour, as well as approximately a mile west of here, maybe a little more than that, has been the site of some tornadoes. What would that do to that pole?
So basically, this pole has been designed to for wind speeds of up to 89 miles per hour. Right now, it's showing that it's passing at that with at 55% of its capacity. So again, the risk is lower for this pole being toppled over by the wind based on what we've designed it to maintain.
You said it was designed to withstand winds up to how high? I didn't catch that.
89 miles per hour.
So one of the previous questions, and I know you can't guarantee anything, but showing pictures to a previous engineer saying that a monopole will fold in half, and showed him where it collapsed lengthwise onto the ground because of the stresses that were put on. You can't guarantee that that's going to happen. And I think the township's aware of that. That's why they put this requirement in there. It'd be 110% of the height off the property line, so it stays on the property. I mean, I would feel even better technically if it was 40 feet away from the building, because at any point it could technically collapse on the building from a safety standpoint.
If I might just add to the board for its consideration, and maybe what is a good example is A5, and in A5 you can see all those other utility structures that are actually at a zero property line. They sit in the public right of way. And the only reason why we're talking about 110-foot setback, also with a caveat that if there's no negative impact from the structure as it's designed, falling onto an adjoining property. I mean, if this was in the right of way at a zero line setback, much like all those other utility structures, wooden structures that are right on the street, I think certainly the wooden utility poles are designed at a lower standard than what this steel pole would be designed at. And they sit right on.
I agree with you, but the utility poles are a bad example because they're controlled by the PUC, of which we have nothing to do with. I'm done.
Any other questions? Colin? No. Jason?
I'm sorry, does the board have any other question?
I was just looking through my notes. I don't believe I have any others.
Okay. No, the board doesn't. Mr. Becker, is there anybody have questions for this witness?
Everybody at home went to bed.
No problem.
No, sir.
Okay.
But from township does have a question
You have a question of the witness?
of Attorney Schubert and the
Yes.
zoning hearing board.
Okay, well, is,
It's related to Mr. Kelman.
okay, then ask the question.
Just for the township's purposes, Attorney Schubert, what is Mr. Kelman's qualifications? And is he testifying as an expert, or have you offered him up to the zoning hearing board as an expert witness?
I have, so Mr. Kelman would meet the technical rules under Pennsylvania state evidentiary rules or federal rules. Mr. Kelman has, he's testified to the experience that he has. He's not a licensed engineer, but Mr. Kelman holds a civil engineering degree. Well, actually, Mr. Kelman, can you go through your qualifications, your background?
Sure. So yeah, like Mr. Schubert said, I have a civil engineering degree from Drexel University. Have over 15 years of experience, and I've testified in zoning hearings such as this multiple times over the course of the years. With respect to small cells, I have roughly 5 years of experience working specifically on small cells.
And you serve in the capacity as a project manager overseeing the various disciplines, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so the qualifications for a person that qualifies an expert would be experience over and above what would be typical of a layman. And I believe that Mr. Kelman would meet that requirement, although I will agree and stipulate that he does not hold a professional engineering certification. But ultimately, the site plans would be signed and sealed off on by an engineer licensed with the Commonwealth. The structural report has been signed off on by a structural engineer licensed with the Commonwealth. And any structural drawings that would be submitted as part of the building permit, we would stipulate would also be signed off on by a structural engineer licensed with the Commonwealth.
Anything else, Mr. Beck?
No, sir.
Okay.
I have a follow-up to that. So the engineer who authored this report, that Calandavelu, so it was not available to testify about the report?
That's correct.
When Mr. Kelman mentioned that that you could look at the design and with the aim of minimizing the risk of collapsing on an adjacent property, does that mean that the current design has not completely minimized that risk as much as possible?
So, I mean, based off of the report itself, and there's a passing report. Again, the risks are low. There are some other things that we can put in place to help address the township's concerns. That would make that kind of reduce that risk even more. So there's definitely more we can probably take a look at. Again, that's something I have to discuss with the structural engineer to see what we can possibly do with this pole and its design.
I would offer up to the board that if there is a concern with regard to this issue, I could see if the structural engineer would be available, or a similar engineer, structural engineer would be available to come in to testify to address that issue, if it would be important for the board to make its determination and consider that issue.
We'll have a follow-up question, and then we'll answer your question. Mr. Hanson.
Mr. Kelman, what is the diameter of the proposed pole? Is it similar in diameter to those light poles that you see in A5?
It's smaller.
A5, A5,
Applicant's A5, number 5, which was the pictures that were submitted.
okay. Yeah, so basically, you're proposing a pole that's roughly 8 inches in diameter. The individual that prepared the photos sent for us, we scale this as much as we possibly can in relation to the objects that we're proposing, and as the objects are on site. So that is roughly, the size of what the pole is going to be. What we depict in the photo is roughly is pretty close to the size of what we're proposing here, or depicts exactly what we're proposing.
Thank you.
To give you a frame of reference really quick, and I can take a look here. Let me just double check my notes on this. Give me a second. I can tell you the base of that foundation. So the base of that foundation is roughly 24 inches wide. That you can see in the if you zoom in closer to where the bollards are. So from side to side on that foundation is about 24 inches.
That's the foundation, but the pole itself is 8 inch in diameter, correct?
Yes. So that right now we currently show the pole in the location of the existing pole. We plopped it right on, we just for this photo sim, we just plopped it right on the existing foundation. And so from side to side, the foundation is 24 inches wide.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Schubert, you had indicated that you could have a structural engineer, either the one who sealed these plans or one affiliated with the structural engineer could be made available if it's need be. So, gentlemen, I'm asking you, do we need that from what's, I guess I'm looking at you, Mr. Hanson, with the,
I don't think so.
okay. Okay, well, the consensus is that we don't need to do that. I would suggest then that since, and we can make this as a condition also, Mr. Schubert, the one condition is now that you're going to resubmit a revised plan, that you also would submit an explanation by the engineer of the potential, what would happen with a potential collapse, as the question was asked by Mr. Hanson, to minimize any damage. Is that agreeable?
That is agreeable.
Can I change your condition a little bit?
Yeah.
Mr. Kelman testified that they could make this more like a monopole to collapse on itself. There were things that he could do. would it be better to condition this that the pole be engineered to collapse on itself like a monopole as opposed to what was just said? Would that be acceptable?
From the applicant's standpoint, that would be acceptable. I've had other conditions similar to that imposed, and then that's reviewed at the time of building permit.
Okay. I have some administrative stuff that we have to take care of, but before that, Mr. Schubert, is there anything else? Wait a minute, before I go into that. Again, Mr. Beck, is there, and I'm putting this out into, I'm getting ahead of myself. Mr. Schubert, is there anything else that you would like to add as far as your testimony and presentation is concerned?
No, sir, I would rest at this point. I would move the exhibits and also, however, keep the record open only to allow the submission of a revised site plan as applicant's exhibit A14, which would correct that existing light pole height and also show a reduction in the overall height of the proposed structure to 40 feet.
Okay. Okay. With that, Mr. Beck, is there anyone that has indicated that they want to make any comments to this proposal, either pro or con?
No, sir.
Okay. With that, then, I will conclude testimony on case number 2418.
Just clarify that the pole height with antenna is going to be 40 feet, correct, Mr. Schubert?
That's correct.
Okay, at this time then, the applicant request of the board to amend the application and documents submitted to change the request from a pole that is 38 feet 9 inches to 37 feet 9 inches, and the existing top being with the antenna of 41 feet to 40 feet. Can I have that as a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Luce. Do I have a second, gentlemen?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bingham. Any discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none, Mr. Luce.
Favor.
Mr. Hanson?
In favor.
Mr. Bingham?
In favor.
And I'll vote in favor. The application has been amended to stipulate that the height is 37.9 and 40 feet max with the antenna. Now, we will also add into evidence, along with the application and documents, applicants' exhibits A1 through A13 as submitted tonight. There is no administrative notice to be taken into account on this property. And with that being said, gentlemen, I will listen to a motion in case number 2418 at 2201 Marietta Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, case number 2418, property located at 2201 Marietta Avenue, Lancaster, PA 17603. Make a motion to grant the request for a special exception to section 270-5.2 Q2B2G and to grant variances to section 270-5.2 Q 2B3F, and a variance side yard setback, but which, or no, 40 feet height, sorry. To the height requirement of variance to section 270-5.2 Q 2B3N4 with the following conditions. One, letter from the property owner, Marjorie Jackson, stating that the applicant had permission to be asking for this variance. Two, the maximum pole with the antenna height will not exceed 40 feet. The pole height to be 37 feet 9 inches, with the antenna to top of the antenna to be 40 feet. Three, submit a revised sheet to show the correct height of the existing light and the new pole. I believe that was applicant's 11. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, design plan is 11.
And four, the pole is to be designed like current monopole, so it collapses on itself, and whatever else can be done to keep the pole from leaving the property in a collapse. And 6 or 5, I'm sorry, are standard conditions.
Okay. Excuse me. I have a motion by Mr. Hanson in case number 2418 at 2201 Marietta Avenue, Lancaster, PA 17603, to grant this special exception for a small cell wireless facility under section 270-5.2 Q2B2G, and the following variances. To section 270-5.2 Q2B3F to remove the requirement for landscaping around the facility, the pole, and a variance to 270-5.2 Q2B3N4 for the to meet the requirements for the setback of the pole equal to 110%, with the following conditions: that a letter be submitted by the applicant from the property owner, giving permission to AT&T to present this case for the property in question. 2, that the maximum height of the pole shall not exceed 37 feet 9 inches and a total of 40 feet to the tip of the antenna. 3, submit a new design sheet of the existing pole to the new pole and the height, the maximum height of the pole and the antenna to be shown. 4, that the pole be designed to be similar to the design of a monopole, in that it, should it happen to collapse, it will collapse upon itself. And 5, standard conditions of this board. Mr. Hanson, is that what your motion was?
Yes, sir.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Bingham. Gentlemen, is there any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Hanson?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote in favor of this motion tonight. However, I'm very skeptical on the setback requirements. They're there for a reason. But I want it on the record in case any other cell phone company comes in, that this was done by a case basis for this property and this property only.
Mr. Hanson, I happen to agree with you, although under court cases, of Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they have always said that variances are case-specific. I think it is pertinent that we make that statement on the record, because in my rather extensive tenure on this board, I've heard applicants come in and say just what you said. You gave this variance to somebody else, you should give it to us. And each case, each variance has to be on the merits. I may also agree with you that I think that this pole is relatively close to the property line. The existing pole that is there would create similar problems in this case, should something happen. I appreciate your number 4 condition. I think that will alleviate some of the issues that you have voiced and hit my concern. So I just want to reinforce your statement. Any other questions, statements? Okay.
Just that I concur with what you've said about modification.
Thank you. So with that, the motion before us, Mr. Luce, how do you vote?
Opposed.
Mr. Hanson?
In favor.
Mr. Bingham?
In favor.
And I will also vote in favor. Mr. Schubert, your request has been granted for the special exception and the 2 variances with the conditions so stated. I appreciate that you can get those conditions that need to be submitted to the board or to the township as soon as possible.
We'll address that,
Before we
Mr.
go off the record, I think we should address that there was a case scheduled for 24/17.
I was just going to bring that one up.
Okay.
After we handle this. Now, Mr. Schubert, don't hang up the phone yet or
Turn off.
disconnect your connection. Somewhere here. You had submitted 2 cases to the township for consideration to come in front of, excuse me, to come in front of this board. We addressed 2418. The other case that was assigned a number was 2417. Although through correspondence and discussions between you, representing AT&T and the township, it was decided that 2417 did not have to come in front of this board. But since the application was assigned a number, it is my opinion, and I'm putting it in front of this board, that this case needs to have a decision by the board. So at this time, gentlemen, I am asking for a motion to accept the determination of the township and the applicant to withdraw case number 2417 from this board's consideration. Can I have that as a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Bingham. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion, gentlemen? Seeing none. Mr. Luce. In favor. Mr. Hanson.
In favor.
Mr. Bingham.
In favor.
And I also vote in favor. Case number 2417 has been withdrawn by the applicant and the township. And we have approve that withdrawal. With that, gentlemen, and everybody else that's on the Zoom, appreciate your indulgence this evening. And Colin, any other old business? All right, excuse me, any other business?
No.
Next meeting?
The third Monday in November, and I think the deadline is this Friday.
Do we have any cases?
As of yet, no.
Okay. So you'll let us know Monday whether you received anything by
Yes.
Friday. Okay? With that, gentlemen, is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, again, thank you to everyone that's on Zoom, and this board stands adjourned. Good night.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good night.